Welcome to More Than a Mission, a podcast where we explore what it looks like to discern God's calling to live an active, intentional life of sharing the gospel. Each week, we talk about the way God is moving in our lives, around the world, and everywhere in between, as well as how God's call to missions may apply to your life. Ready to explore your calling? Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of More Than a Mission. My name is Micah Torgerson, and I'm joined as always by Andrew Carlberg.
How you guys doing?
We have two very special guests on our show tonight. Two of our very own H Squad leaders, Suze Rinks.
Hey everyone.
And Cami Chickanowski.
Hi.
Thank you to the both of you for joining us tonight. This is super exciting. I've been looking forward to doing this one.
I have been looking forward to it as well. Ever since we heard Connor's, we're like, we got to get on this mission podcast.
So real.
Actually, he was just our very first recurring guest. So you guys have some work to do, it looks like.
Oh no.
Nice.
Yeah, he just recorded one with Zaya and Nick Gold.
Oh my gosh, fun. Wow, we do have some catching up to do, I guess.
Yep, we have a 2-for-1 here because you're both on. So we're kind of even, you know?
There you go. Yeah.
All right, before we get into any of the deep details, would both of you just tell us a little bit more about yourselves, you know, where you're from, what you've done in life up until this point, you know, all the good stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I'm Suze. I'm 27. I'm from Texas. I actually grew up in Austin for most of my life. Wait, what was it? Just what we've been doing.
Yeah, like where you grew up, you know, if you went to college, I guess anything.
Yeah, okay, cool. Sweet. I went to the U of A in Fayetteville. It actually took me a really long time to graduate, but that is okay. Victory laps are fun. But I'm an official graduate this fall, so I'm super excited. I'm getting my degree in the mail. That's just a big victory for me. Let's see. After college, I went on my first world race in 2018. Got back. I was home for maybe 2 weeks, close to a month. And then I left again, and I was an alumni team leader. And then I came back, and I actually moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. I've just been hanging out here. I live with my aunt, and I also work for her. And then, now I'm going to squad lead for you guys. So that's me. Also, I love breakfast tacos.
I think I'm learning that, like, if you're part of World Race, it's just a requirement to move to North Carolina when you're done.
Yeah, a lot of people actually live here. There's actually a missional community not too far from Charlotte. So yeah, a lot of just little post world race life.
That's sweet. What are you getting your degree in?
It's in child development.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. Do you have any plans or things you want to do with that?
Gosh. Sometimes yes, and then sometimes no. I think something I would like to do with that degree is actually one day, this is a really big dream of mine, is to have a children's home, whether that's here in the States or that's international. I definitely feel more called to go international, but I'm still kind of mulling it over with the Lord and figuring out what does this actually look like. I've had opportunities to serve in different children's homes here in the States, but also internationally, partly with the World Race, but also on different mission trips. And so I've seen the good and the hard parts of it. So definitely still dreaming, and I would love to do that one day.
That's awesome. So you're finishing up your degree now. Was child development what you were originally always studying, or did it change because of the World Race?
No, so it's kind of crazy. I started off, I think I was undeclared, or maybe I was pre-kinesiology or something like that. I actually had no idea what I wanted to study when I started going to college. It was definitely I'm doing this because this is what I should be doing, not necessarily I just did it. I don't know. It kind of wasn't even a thought. So I changed my major to, what did I change it to? Speech path. And then I quickly realized this is not for me. I stuck with it for a while just to kind of like really get into it, see like, oh, maybe this is what I want to do. Maybe it's not. It definitely was not it for me. And then there was actually a professor who was in the child development department. She came in and she was talking about like what she does, why she likes it. And it just like totally captivated me. And I was like, okay, I think this is actually something that I'm really interested in. I love kids. I love learning about the different like developmental, let's just like milestones that kids and even adults hit throughout their life. And so I went to my advisor, got some really cool advice from him. He also like totally loved the Lord. So that was just super sweet. He actually encouraged me to essentially drop out and go be a missionary. He was like, this isn't where you want to be. And I'm like, no, it's not. But I also know that I need to graduate to respect my parents. And then it was like, okay, once I'm done, I can do the world race. So yeah.
Dang, that's really interesting. That's
Yeah,
honestly,
definitely.
that's so cool though.
It was a process for sure. So but yeah, that's me.
Cami, how about you?
Yeah, so I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. I'm a big Buckeye fan for all my Buckeye listeners out there. And I so I grew up, went to like a private Christian school. And then it was really small, so I wanted like something bigger. So I decided to go to a different U of A, but University of Akron. And I got my degree in HR there. And I was kind of like Suze, I was undecided for a little bit towards the beginning. And then I declared accounting as my major, but then I took an accounting course. And then I switched. So accounting was not for me. And
I don't blame you.
Yeah, no, definitely not. So then I decided to do HR. Human resource management felt like a little bit more my style. I liked business, but I liked people. So that was kind of mixing the two. But like all through college, like I knew I was there for like more than just my education. And I think in college is where like my faith really became alive, and I experienced like really good Christian community, got super involved in campus ministry there, and just really fell in love with ministry in itself. And so after I graduated with this HR degree, I'm like, okay, what do I do? Like kind of feeling that tug, but I had some opportunities through an internship to work in management at Target. So I, said yes to the full-time job, to like a good salary, and was just like paying off my student loans and really just like kind of feeling set, like trying to think, make a 5-year, 10-year plan, all that fun stuff. But pretty quickly into that, maybe like I graduated in 2017 from college, and about 6 months into working full time after graduation, the Lord kind of wrecked all my plans like he typically does, and asked me to quit and asked me to pursue missions. And I had never really known what the world race was. Like I had heard of it through a friend of a friend, and I knew what the organization was, but not really. And I just thought the concept was cool. So when the Lord asked me to go and like fill out an application, I was like shocked. I'm like, what? Like, no. But I said yes, and I kept walking through those open doors, and that led me to N Squad, which we launched in October of 2018. And fun fact, Suze and I, we were on squad together, and we were on a team together starting off. So so that like the world race just kind of, I don't know, wrecked me for anything ordinary. And I think at this point, I could go on and on about the things I learned on the race, but I think coming home from the race, I knew that I didn't want to go back to like a secular job. I didn't want to go back to just going through the motions like I had been before. And I wanted like ministry to be involved in my life for the rest of my life. So I was like, okay, Lord, well, what do you want me to do for work? And he asked me to wait, and I'm like, okay. So I waited, and we had gotten back from the race in August of 2019. And so I waited and waited, and finally he landed me at a school working as an administrative assistant back in the high school that I graduated from. So I actually work in the elementary school, but it's my alma mater. And so getting to like come full circle back to that atmosphere and back to that school has been a really cool opportunity to minister to these children and to just love on them and show them Jesus. And so I've learned this past year how to incorporate ministry into full-time work. And but coming back from the race, like I knew I wanted to continue with the world race. Like I knew I wanted to squad lead at some point. That's been a dream in my heart since early on in my race. So I just kind of was waiting patiently on the Lord, and he, through lots of different events and circumstances, placed me with the perfect squad, the perfect leadership team. I couldn't be more happy to launch in January with H Squad. And that's how I'm here.
Woo! H
So
Squad.
you kind of started to touch on it, but my next question is going to be briefly. I mean, you can go long, I don't care. But like briefly, what would you say were like one or two of the biggest things you learned on the race? And then with that, like, why do you guys feel like, one, what did the call back into squad leading look like? And two, like, why is that something that like is on your heart to do?
Good question. I think one of the biggest things I learned on the race was refinement. And there's just something about like total and complete surrender and being willing to not only burn, like when we sing about, oh, like set me on fire, like, up until the race, I had assumed that was just like a passionate love for Jesus. But on the race, like I realized that prayer, you're asking for some pain, when you pray that. And I think refinement is that process of burning away everything that hinders you from being completely and totally immersed in Jesus. And so I think on the race, month one, the Lord spoke burn like over my race and just said, this is going to be a year of burning and refinement. And so he asked me to like surrender my own fleshly desires to want to self-protect so that I wouldn't get burned and get hurt. And through that process of just kind of surrendering my own pride and laying myself down and being willing to lay in the fire with him. I mean, there were some painful things. Like, I mean, going into the world race and going into an area like an environment where you're abandoning so much, like you come face to face with some of like the hardest things and within yourself too. Not just like external things, but being willing to sit in that fire and let him burn away all those things. You come out so clean on the other side. And I feel like I came out with a new understanding of who God is and who I am and how intimate a relationship with him can be if you're willing to go through some trial and some pain. So yeah, wasn't very brief. I apologize.
Oh man. Yeah, I think for me, like my first race, I think something that really marks it is just this fact of really pressing into my pain. And with that comes just a lot of uprooting a lot of like lies that I've been believing for so long, but also realizing that I was free in my emotions, that it was okay for me to actually like understand, why am I feeling angry right now? Why am I sad? Like, what is actually triggering me and how, like, where's the truth in it all? What's valid? What's not? Yeah, I don't know. I think that's something that I like really learned from my first race of just really like sitting in my pain and being okay with going to the Father in it all. But also along with that, it was realizing that the Father is faithful to me, and he's never going to leave my side. That's actually something that I like really struggled with, is this fact of like, is the Lord actually faithful to me? Because in my life, I just have dealt with like this fear of abandonment. And so that was entangling me in so many different ways and causing me to like project it on other people, or to not understand that like my friends weren't just going to leave me. And it took a while to like finally get to this point of actually receiving healing and finding freedom within it all, and realizing that I am enough, that I hold value, my voice matters, and I'm wildly free in him throughout it all. And that he's not going to go anywhere. So yeah, I think that's just something that's like has literally been on my mind for the past 2 or 3 months, just like thinking back on my first race, and even like going out and alumni team leading on my second one. It was learning that because when you're in leadership, like I think Cam has said this many times to me, when you're in leadership, all of your insecurities are just like right in front of your face. Whether you realize it or not, they're going to be right there. But in reality, it's like surrendering them to the Lord and realizing his truth over it all. And that's something that I learned. Oh gosh, that's something I learned on my second race, being an alumni team leader. It's just that I have ownership in certain areas, and there's other areas where I don't have ownership in when it comes to people's emotions and just whether they respond or they react. So yeah, definitely just learning to like sit in my pain and realize that he is never going to leave me. So
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you both mentioned similar things along the lines of like a prayer that involves like to burn is to invite pain. And then Suze, you talk about like experiencing pain. I know I shared this at training camp. I don't think I've shared this on the podcast. I don't know. I talk a lot. But like one of the most beautiful analogies for me in scripture is there's the passage that talks about like we don't take new wine and pour it into old wineskins. Like the whole point of that was like the fermentation process of a wineskin. It like as the wine ferments, the wineskin would expand and it would become hard and rigid. And so if you put new wine in the second time, it would explode, and it would not only ruin the wineskin but the wine inside of it. There's actually one way you could take an old wineskin and restore it to being able to like go through a fermentation process a second time, and it was to soak the wineskin in oil and massage it like really firmly, and like that can restore it. And so it's just this like beautiful imagery of how often like we pray for the new wine, we want the blessing, we want the thing on the other side, but so often like the Lord's response is like, hey, deal with your pride, hey, deal with your lust, hey, deal with these things that like we write up as, oh, the Lord's not really speaking into this situation, when like so often before he can actually answer anything to do with the new wine, like we have to be willing to go through this like painful massaging process to like it's not just to like build character, but like it's also to like enable us to actually be able to hold the thing, like the blessing, the new wine on the other side. Because like if we have not been massaged and gone through the pain to be able to handle it, we not only ruin ourselves as the wineskin, but we ruin like the blessing that he's trying to bring to us.
That's good. That's a good word.
yeah, it is.
Yeah. So then from there, what makes you excited about, like, why do you want to step back in and squad lead now?
Great question. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Great. So on my race, like with refinement, a big area in the way that I like that helped me to become refined was through community. Because there's a lot of things about yourself that you can't see that your brothers and sisters in Christ can, and can point you to Jesus in, and can point you back into that fire. So I think something that was ignited in me on my race was a passion for community, a passion for discipleship. And I knew like how I shared in my little intro, I knew that ministry, like God was calling me into a life of full-time ministry. I had no clue what that looked like. But on the race, that like my passions were so heightened in the area of discipleship that I know now that, you know, for in some facet of ministry for the rest of my life, there's going to be discipleship. And I mean, Jesus says, go and make disciples of all nations. And that's not just evangelizing and converting someone and having them pray a sinner's prayer. That's walking with them in the process of becoming more like Jesus. And that was one of my favorite parts of my race, was getting the opportunity to walk alongside my squad mates and point them closer to Jesus. So in doing that, I'm like, I love this setting for that, because you take a year out of your entire life and you dedicate it solely to whatever God wants. You know, you are completely and totally open, and the transformation that can happen in that time period is so great and so astounding, that for me to get the joy of being a part of watching somebody else, like all of the light bulbs turn on, or, you know, something just clicking. And if I could be a part of just witnessing that and walking with them and reminding them that they're not alone and pointing them to Jesus. And not only that, but helping them do that for each other and helping them learn how to walk next to somebody else. And I think just the whole process of discipleship, the whole process of community and discovering community is something I'm just like so passionate about. And on the race, there's just so many opportunities for you to learn how to do that. And so that's kind of like, that was a huge thing that the Lord put on my heart during my race, that I'm like, I need to find a way to do this again. And I mean, I'm sure I'll share more with you guys like while we're together, but month 7 of my race, I, you know, was asked to squad lead after the race, and the Lord had me say no, which was like the most devastating thing in the world, because I wanted to so badly, and it was like everything my heart was like leaning towards, and the Lord, you know, moved me in a different direction for some time. But I know that's because he was teaching me that I'm supposed to wait on him and not wait on my own desires, like even desires that are good and desires that, you know, he has for me. If I'm waiting on those things, like I'm just going to be spinning my wheels. But if I'm waiting on him, you know, that's where there's fruit and that's where there's abundance. And so he, you know, asked me to say no, and the squad leading came up multiple times in the last year and a half, and he just had me continue saying no. And all of that leads me to H Squad, which is why I just am so passionate about this squad and so excited for what God has in store. Because when we first got the call, like we were January, we were with H Squad, like I felt the Lord say, like, it's for this group of people that I asked you to wait. And that was just so special, because I mean, I don't know why he has me here, but I just know it's going to be good because he's in it. And, you know, yeah, he's good like that. So.
Oh man, so cool. Man, I was just thinking as you're speaking, because I also have like similar thoughts as to why I said yes. But I don't think I've shared this with anyone. So here we go. I'm just going to share it. I have this habit of, I love to journal. But I always go through them super fast because I don't like writing on the back of the page. So what I do is when I finish filling it in one way, I flip it and I start from the opposite end and go through. So this is crazy. After alumni team leading and moving to Charlotte, my community just looks super different. It's also just been a very like winter of a season, to put it just in that terms. And there have definitely been times where it's just been like incredibly lonely. But also knowing that I'm not alone. And so it's just been a really interesting sort of season in life. And I was journaling, and at this point I had flipped it and I was journaling, and I came across this page where I was like, I had written down my dreams. I love to dream, whether that's like life dreams or it's like a little daily dream. I just like I love dreaming. I think it's so fun. I think there are just so many like endless opportunities that you can take a hold of. But anyways, so I come across my dreams, and I had actually written down squad leading, and I was like, why did I write that down? Like, what where did this actually come from? And so I have my journals from the race with me here in Charlotte. And I was like, I'm going to go back through them. I'm going to see if maybe like when I was on my race, I was a team leader for like the middle part. And I was like, maybe that's when I started dreaming of it. I don't know. So I like flipped through some of my old journals and I actually found this page where I was like, Lord, I actually do want a squad lead, but it actually terrifies me because it is a challenge. I remember talking to Fran on one of our calls and I was like, hey, can you like send me the application? I want to do gap year. Like I want to be a squad leader for gap year. And she, oh man, she's just so funny and just so great. But she was like, Suze, why not 11 and 11? Why not like she just kind of asked me like, why not this, or this? And I was like, okay. I was like, did the Lord like tell you that I want to do that? But I like haven't told anyone. This is weird. And so she actually like started talking to me about team leading. And I was like, I like felt it very highlighted. And I was like, okay, Lord, yeah, like that's actually something I want to do. But then squad leading has always been in the back of my mind. But to be honest, like when I finished alumni team leading, I was like, okay, that's it. Like I'm done with adventures and missions in the sense of like going back out on the field with them. But I was like, man, Jesus, I love discipleship. I love getting to go out to new places and just like living life with people shoulder to shoulder facing him. And I think that's what it's all about for me, is just like community is beautiful. It's a gift. And it's just something that is like, oh, it's just so good. And so I think that's like a really big reason why I was like, yeah, I want a squad lead, because you get to live life with people. You get to like seek discomfort every single day in just really cool ways. And so, yeah, that's why.
That's really awesome, Suze. And I think like I just love the whole like the story of where Fran was saying, well, why not this? Why not this? Like, I don't know. It's almost like we paint this picture for ourselves of like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and it's never like it never ends up that way. Like I think I shared this with Fran and our group of team leaders the day where we all like broke out and met in our roles, and I was just kind of like, you know, if you sat all 44 down of us in the room and said and like went through all the roles and said, okay, who wants to do this? There was no way in heck I was raising my hand to be a team leader. Like I don't know. It's just, I've never like seen myself as a leader. And so to have other people like kind of speak that over me and say like, hey, I think like you would be good at this has kind of just been changing things for me. So it's cool to see that you've also gone through that.
Yeah, man, that's so good. It's just, I think something that I've been like thinking about a lot lately is how can I actually challenge myself? What are ways to seek discomfort in our everyday lives? Also, not gonna lie, I've been watching a lot of Yes Theory.
Yeah.
Do you guys know them? They're freaking cool. But I just like really love how they just like engage in community in such a cool way by just like engaging with strangers and just getting to know people and like doing these crazy things. But it like really encouraged me to like sit with the Father, excuse me, to like sit with the Father and actually be like, am I seeking discomfort with you? Or am I like literally just like going through the motions? Like what is happening? And I think for me, like when I think of squad leading, it's definitely like not comfortable. So I'm excited to see like what the Lord does through it all.
Yeah, I just learned, I was listening to a sermon earlier today on a really cool, there's a passage in Numbers 20 that I love, where they're like, Israelites are grumbling for a second time to Moses about the fact they don't have water. Moses goes to God. God's like, speak to the rock. Moses hits the rock. Water still flows from it, but like the disobedience in that ends up costing Moses the promised land. And like piece of it that I learned this morning that I had never heard before is like the place that happened was like literally called Kadesh, which is the word for holy in Hebrew. And so like just this idea that Moses was stepping into a situation that looked exactly like in Exodus 17, exact same situation, and he was supposed to hit the rock. And so like Moses comes to this exact same situation in a place called holy, and he treats it as like common. He treats it as like just like what had happened before. And so like just exactly what you're talking about, the idea of like challenging yourself and actually like sitting in discomfort with the Father is like, I think so much of that is often just like, Lord, like in going through the motions, like, are there things that I'm doing just because like that's how you've asked me to do it before? Or like, am I actually asking you like in this moment right now, like choosing to see each moment as holy, like, Lord, what do you have in this moment?
Dang. That's good.
On a similar note, a question that I've just like love asking people in general, and this can apply to like world race and the fact that we're about to squad lead or not, but I would just like love to hear what the Lord is like currently teaching you guys.
Yeah, I think, oh man, I feel like there's so many different things. Recently, man, yesterday was just a really hard day for me. And I just like took the night to kind of rest and be and just try to kind of like just sit in my pain and figure out what was going on in my mind and my heart, because there was just some weird disconnect and I was just feeling like just really hurt and really angry. And so I was actually doing this really fun yoga, and she just like she reads scripture over you and she guides you in different things. And there was just one part where she was like, I want you to ask the Lord, like, what is the state of your heart? And I was like, man, I don't know. Like, I don't know what it is. And I was like, Father, what? Like, what's going on in my heart? Like, what is actually happening? And he gave me this really cool vision of my heart, and it was just like super red and it was fleshy, but it was bright. But like, it was like just like a heart that you would draw on a piece of paper, basically, is what I saw. But at the very like tip of it, there was this like small piece of stone. And when I saw that, she was then like, I want you to ask the Father if there are pieces of stone that are within your heart that need to be removed. And I was like, okay. I was like, okay. Yeah, so I was just like, Lord, I realized that this like stone in my heart is actually just because I'm really angry. And I know that it has to do a lot with my anger, and I know that like it has to do with like just the thing that had happened earlier in the day. But I was like, can you remove it? Like, can you show me how to release this, to surrender it to you? Because I don't want to be angry anymore. Like, I just feel really disconnected to myself and to him. And so when I was asking him, when I like just started, I was just praying and just asking the Lord to remove that part of my heart that was just really bitter and angry. It was like the red just like drained down into it. And then within like, it was almost like he snapped his fingers and my heart was white. And he was like, Suze, you are pure of heart. And I want you to see this. And so I think like that is just something recently that he's been showing me, is to just like ask him, what's the state of my heart? What's the state of my mind? What's the disconnect? What am I like? I think it's really just like, what am I holding on to, and what needs to be surrendered? What needs to be released? So.
That's cool. I love that.
Thanks.
I think for me, just like, I mean, I think this whole year there's been this theme of harmony, and what it looks like to lean into two seemingly opposite things and having them come together to form a union that's pleasing and whole. And like when you think about harmony, you think of like two different sounds, but somehow they're beautiful. So I think this year has been a lot about living in the tensions of two different things. Like for me, for example, learning how to lean into being like full of joy, but also full of grieving and sadness and sorrow. Those seem like two different concepts, two things, but being in two places at once and experiencing two things at the same time can be a really beautiful thing. And so me and God, like month by month, have been walking through like two seemingly opposite things and coexisting together. So I think right now, for me, I'm seeing the Lord bring harmony to this idea of being present where I'm at, but also filled with expectation for what's to come. I'm like, with the waiting that's taken place to squad lead, there's just so much anticipation and so much eagerness to just get to where I'm going and to just be immersed in that again and to be with H squad, but learning contentment with where he has me and learning how to be present where I'm at is something that could be hard for me to do. So I think we're walking through that. I think he's also teaching me where to find my my value. I think I'm like definitely a recovering perfectionist. And so there's this idea of having to be good for other people and having to do good and be perfect. And as a squad leader, I know that I'm confronted with that insecurity and with that tendency to get my value and my goodness from how well I do at leading or how other people perceive me and whatnot. So I think that's something me and the Father have been talking a lot about, is this concept that he is good and he calls me good. And I don't have to wrestle with other people calling me good or approving of me, because my Father is good and he calls me good and he approves of me. So there's always that. And as I'm like walking into squad leading, he's just reminding me of that truth, and I'm speaking that over myself. So I think the two of those things, like those are some big things I'm learning with him right now.
Those are both really good. And so I guess speaking of expectations, I would want to know, were there any expectations that you guys had for our squad, like coming into training camp? And then like, what are your thoughts on those afterwards? So I know, so you guys have been through training camp at least once or twice now. So just curious on kind of that front.
I don't think there were really from me, I don't think there were really any expectations that I had like specifically on the squad necessarily. I think there's definitely just like, I mean, we all were just like praying and just like heard a lot of like really cool things from the Lord, and just worship, like worship was one of the biggest ones, and just like watching the squad worship in unity and just like seeing the glory of the Lord just be released all over the place. I think like, I don't know, I think when I like first thought of training camp, I like thought of my training camp, but obviously like it's not going to be like that because COVID. So it's like, let go of all the like expectations or ideas or thoughts. And it was just coming in and being like, yeah, this is actually really sweet. And this is really, really good. And this squad is incredible. And I'm like, literally, I'm so thankful to be a part of it. Like sometimes I'll sit here and I'll be like, oh my gosh, Lord, like I prayed for community, but what the heck? Like this just, you guys are just really cool and really sweet. And I'm so excited to just like continue in community with y'all. So.
Yeah. I mean, expectations, I think the first thing that came to mind was just, I mean, it's hard not to compare. Like, I think that's something I have to fight is like, you know, I don't want to compare this to my race. Like, this is a totally different experience. God can do whatever he wants. But I think, you know, the squad Suze and I were on during our race was 24 people. And so coming into training camp, knowing that this was a squad of 44 was overwhelming for me at first, because I'm not an extrovert. I'm not the best in crowds. Like I do better with smaller groups. And so like, as much as I was like pumped about 44, like, oh my gosh, God, like, look what you did. Like, look what you drew together. It was almost like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to navigate in that setting? And so I was a little apprehensive, if I'm being honest, just about the number and the whole idea of unity. Like how are 44 people going to come together and be unified, like as one body? Because the larger the number, the harder that is. And so that's something walking into training camp, I was like, okay, God, like, I'm excited to see what you do here. Like, I don't know how this is going to look, because it just looks different than what I experience with just such a small squad that we had. And God just blew me away. Like, I mean, there was just multiple times where we would just like look at each other as leaders and be like, what the crap? Like this squad is like already a family unit and is already so closely tethered together. Like even we were hearing stories at the very first day that there were road trips being had like before training camp, and
Yeah.
you guys being a part of that, and just like Bible studies happening and Zoom calls, and even just like before training camp, the foundation, and into training camp, just the unity was shocking to me. And not that I wasn't expecting it, because I know that happens when you enter the presence of God as he draws us close to each other. But I mean, my expectations were just like blown out of the water. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's something that I'm like, wow, God, you are so good, because I feel like this squad is already so unified, and it's such a testimony to the goodness of God, because 44 is a large number. And the fact that we're already so close is just astounding. I'm just in awe about it.
No, that's so good, because that's kind of one of the things that I also thought of coming into training camp. You know, like you were just saying, you have a group of 44 people, 50 plus if you include all of our leadership. Like, I get, like, it's just so easy to come into that thinking like, okay, there's going to be at least one person that I don't get along with. Like, it's just going to happen. And something that I've been reading through lately in 1 John 4 is about like, is God's love and our love as a response to God's love. And part of something that I was reading through, literally, like it says, like saying that you can't love this person is not a valid excuse. Like if we're living in God's love every day, like we have all the tools necessary to love anyone, no matter what. And so I think coming out of training camp, it was just so evident that we spent that week living in God's love, and that like there was just so much unity within all 50 plus of H squad. And I'm not saying that it's like, it's always going to be perfect and it's always going to be that way, but like, it was so cool to see.
Yeah. And I remember Chris, like our coach, Chris, when there was a moment at training camp where worship just kind of spontaneously broke out, and it was just such a powerful like move of the Spirit, and we were just so unified in that moment. And I remember Chris speaking up and saying like, remember this, because when it gets hard and you guys are on each other's last nerves, remember that it's worship that brings you guys together, and it's the love that you have for God, like you said, and it's that passion and that worship that is going to now unify you and cause you to have greater love for your brother and sister, even when you want to wring their neck, you know? So I think about like what Sue said, that word being spoken over our squad of worship and praise. And it's that praise and that worship in the presence of the Holy Spirit that draws us further into love, which draws us further into unity, you know?
I just think, I don't know, looking back on this, it's been a little over a year now since I like officially committed to the world race, and just thinking back on everything that's happened throughout this last year, like it's kind of hard for me to mentally comprehend like where I am now versus, you know, where I was when I signed up for the race, and like even just what I thought I was signing up for, and like how much that has changed. So that kind of makes me curious to know, like, did you guys have any expectations going into your race that like God just completely shattered? Because for me, it's like I had some international missions experiences before, and they were mostly short-term, like 1 week-ish long trips. So, you know, I was expecting something a little different, but not like community like this, or like people just so invested in each other and so invested in their relationships with God.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like I'm trying to think back to that time. I actually worked at a summer camp right before going to training camp, like launching on the race. And so I feel like a lot of my focus was really just on that. And I wasn't necessarily like really thinking about, oh, I'm about to launch on the world race. It was kind of like, yeah, I'm about to do the world race. Great. Here we go. Like, get me to the airport, I'm ready to do it, was kind of my mentality. And I think there was just this expectation of like, yeah, I'm just, we'll see what the day holds and we'll just go from there. And like, it's just going to be beautiful all the time. I'm going to love my team always. I'm never going to get annoyed. I'm never going to have a fierce conversation or sit at the table with my team and cry my eyes out because I don't know what's going on in my life, sort of thing. And so I think it just like, on our first team cam, we week 1 had like a fierce conversation of just our whole team coming together and just bringing things to the table and just putting things out in the open. And I think in that moment, I realized that the Lord was doing something so much deeper than I could like ever think of or imagine. And so it's just this like really cool just moment in time of being like, I'm going to slow down and actually like just really take this in and realize that the Lord is like moving within all of this. This is great. Like, I love this. I love that I'm here, but he has so much more than what I've come up with in my head. So.
That's so good. And like, again, that just makes me think back to like everything for me that's happened this past year. Like I signed up for the race fully expecting like, I signed up last November and I was like, okay, there's whatever 50 many people signed up for this trip now. I'll see them at training camp in October. It'll be good. And God just has this funny way of flipping things on their head, and COVID happened and we had multiple Zoom calls every week that were lasted like way longer than they should have. And people driving across the country to see each other. And like, it was just like this crazy community that we already started building that I had absolutely no idea that I needed. But like, it has helped me prepare for what I'm about to do.
That's so good. I think for me, like an expectation, it's so silly when I think about it, but when I kind of how I shared earlier, when I signed up for the race, I was coming out of college, and in college there was so much like freedom that I found within myself, like parts of my identity that was unlocked, parts of my faith that were restored. And I was just like on top of the world, like on this spiritual high. And I'm like, okay, now that I have reached and the pinnacle of my faith and I have learned everything there is to learn about myself, now I get to go out and I get to pour out to the nations and serve the kingdom of the Lord. And it was just so funny. Like, that's literally like what I thought I was walking into. And very quickly into that, I realized there's still more stuff like I had to discover about myself, and that discovery is never ending. Like I am never going to reach a point in my life where I have fully like discovered who I am and discovered who God was like. And I think there was some spiritual pride even a little bit there, that God was teaching me humility as he was teaching me refinement and learning that the process of pouring out myself to the nations isn't separate from self-discovery, and isn't separate from God pouring into me and me like focusing on my relationship with God. So I think I just think back to that and just how funny that was, that I actually was convinced that I had learned everything I needed to learn about myself.
Yeah. On a similar note, kind of like the flip side of that question, I think I would love to hear what was the most challenging part about the race for you. And then like part 2 of that is what would your advice be over that challenge to someone going / like maybe your advice to yourself as you're going round 2?
I think so. Something that I learned from my race is just that like you're going to find people that you really connect with, and it's incredible. And those friendships are really good and they're a gift of the Lord. But also don't like let that stop you from getting to know other people. I think that's something that when I think of like, man, not that I regret it, but it's like, if I could go back on my race, like I would love to just be more intentional with this person or this person or this person. And so I think that's like my one piece of advice, just in the sense of like getting to know your community. Everyone's so different, and it may be easier to connect with one person than it is with this person over here, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. And so I think that is something that I've been thinking of, is just like now getting to squad lead and getting the chance to actually like sit with people and be intentional and get to know them, is something that I'm like really looking forward to. So, yeah.
I think that's some really good advice, and even something that I've kind of seen just coming out of training camp. You know, like there were so many of us there, and like you were saying, Cami, like it's overwhelming sometimes how many people we have on the squad. And so I think I kind of just had that expectation, like, okay, I'm not going to get to know everyone super well. And just looking back on it, like there were people that I didn't talk to quite as much, and then like having the chance to talk to them now after training camp, I'm just kind of finding out like, wow, you were way different than I thought you were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's cool that, again, you guys are engaging in those conversations before launch, like, because a lot of times like you don't discover that until month 7. You're like, where were you at, you know? So I think that is a really good piece of advice, Suze, of don't, like, in life it's like you can always choose your friends, like that's what we've been, you can always choose who you want to surround yourself with, but in this setting it's very different. It's like that's chosen by God, you know, and like that's, you've been plopped into this community. So it's like, that's something I learned, was like, I would have probably never picked this person outside of the race, but wow, like the fact that God placed you in my life, and I engaged, even though it was difficult, maybe a little awkward, maybe we didn't connect right at first, but by the end of it, it's like, you are my sister. Like, and I have such a deep love for you that I would have never known if I didn't engage. So yeah. I think that would be mine, like similar to Suze, is the hardest part, I think, for me in the race was, we always said like, press in, like you always press in, you know, and lean in even when it's hard.
Consider.
Yeah. But like that idea of pressing in, and like there's gonna reach a point where it's like, it would be so much easier to just put my headphones in and turn on Netflix and just coast for the rest of the race. Like that's a real thing. And when you're confronted with that decision and you choose to press in instead, like that's where God shows up, and that's where community becomes even more unified. And that's when self-discovery and more of God, like, you encounter, because it's when you had the option to run away, but you chose to run into the difficult conversation, or you chose to run into worship. And I think that was the most difficult part of the race, but also the most fulfilling and rewarding part. And that'd be my advice to anyone doing the race is, you know, when you reach that point where it would just be way easier to stop or to run from whatever it is, don't, like, run into it, press in. It's going to be worth it.
Yeah, I think even going off of that, like, Andrew, I read your text in the group me of just how you went to get a haircut, and the guy was like, oh, you're doing the world race, and just talked to you in Spanish. Like, we are going to a Spanish speaking country. And so like even pressing into the uncomfortable, but like pressing into the uncomfortable of trying to speak Spanish, even if you don't know a lot. The thing is, people are going to love that you're trying to be intentional with them. Like, we were made for connection. So why not use our gift of connection that we've been given to connect with those within our squad, within our community, but also with those that we're serving with. Maybe we're like on the street one day, walking around, hanging out, and we see someone and we're like, I don't know a lot of Spanish or whatever language it may be, but it's like, I'm going to really try this time and we'll see what happens. Maybe they know some English, you know? So it's just like really, really fighting for that connection within it all.
That's good.
Okay, I've got one more thing, and I just want to know your honest feedback on feedback. So like, one, is feedback or anything like of that nature something that you guys had present in your life and your communities before the race? like what were your or like what were your initial thoughts when you like were told this is what we're doing in regards to feedback, and how has it kind of like changed since then?
So I grew up in a environment that doesn't necessarily talk about the hard things. And like feedback was not really something, it was just not something that like my environment necessarily operated in. And then when I went to college and I started getting plugged into different ministries and I worked at like a Christian sports camp throughout the summers, I was kind of introduced to feedback in a sense where it's like, we're giving you advice and we're also calling you higher, but it wasn't necessarily in the form that we have been shown through AIM. And so when I first heard of feedback, I was like, wow, this is making me feel pretty squirmy. Like I don't know if I love this. But once it was like, man, once we started practicing and just like really engaging in feedback and really just like sitting with Holy Spirit before you even try to give someone feedback just really sets the tone. And so I think that's something that I've really learned, that I just learned while being on the race, in alumni leading, but also just like, it is like feedback is so nice. Like coming off the field and then coming into a place where you're like, I'm going to continue using my feedback. I've grown so much in it. People don't love it. Like, people who have not been exposed to it are not going to know I'm giving you encouraging feedback. This is constructive. Like, that's just not how their brain works. And so I am really excited to get back into an environment and a community who really values feedback and is in a place where they're able to receive it. Because it is such an incredible tool to just really be aware, like self-aware, but also it's so cool to just like see how the Father is working in your friends and just like be able to grow. So it's squirmy sometimes, but it's really good and really needed.
Yeah. And I mean, I think going off of that, like it is squirmy. I still get like nervous when I give feedback. I mean, that's not something that necessarily will go away. Like it will get easier and you'll learn how to do it and you'll see the fruit of it and it'll be something that's exciting. But I think it's okay to acknowledge, hey, could be uncomfortable and this makes me a little squirmy, you know? But I think feedback for me, like I grew up in a house where feelings were very open. Like everything was on the table, come from a big, loud Italian family. We spoke our minds. And I think I had to learn how to refine that a little bit. Like, again, refinement of learning how to speak it in love, even when my emotions are really high, going to the Lord first with those emotions, sorting it out with him, and then bringing it to the table with my team. But I remember even at training camp, after the feedback talk, I was like, wait, I went up to my leader, one of the leaders, and I was like, are you sure like this is how this works? Because to me, it feels like really exposing that it's done in a team setting. Like, why wouldn't I just go one-on-one with this person? I was like really confused by that aspect of it. And I'm like, that feels like really exposing. And I would kind of like had my guard up against it a little bit. And after like, I let the leader like share their heart and like the why behind that, and seeing it actually unfold in a group setting, it makes so much sense. And it's like, it's such a unifying thing, you know, like, and there's so much safety in the group setting. And I think for me, my walls were up because I was afraid of vulnerability and like being exposed and being vulnerable if someone gave me a piece of feedback, or, you know, that being on display for everyone. And that perfectionist in me was like, oh, I don't like that. And I don't want to do that to somebody else. But the idea that you're like that piece of feedback, whether, you know, constructive or positive, whatever it is, it's on display for everyone to see, to be able to give testimony to that, and then to encourage you in that, and then to celebrate with you when you've grown further and deeper into those things. So, I mean, I've coming out on the other side, it's like, that was one of my favorite things within community was the feedback times. And that's where I saw the most amount of growth. So it's definitely not like something that we say is a really good thing, but it's actually a terrible thing. Like I saw a meme, like a world race meme that said that, like that said something like that. And I was like, that's not true. Like I got mad about it. I'm like, feedback is great. Don't look at the meme, but anyways.
Don't look at the meme.
Don't look at the meme. It's not true.
Yeah, I think going off of that too, I was just reminded, like when we did the teaching on feedback, and I remember like being so nervous to give Connor feedback in front of the whole squad. I was just like, wow, I'm feeling super squirmy about this. I probably voiced it to them right before, but then it was just like, it just hit me. I was like, wow, this is just a really beautiful thing. Like it is really good. Definitely, like it still makes me squirmy, but it's still really good.
That's awesome. That I am really glad to hear that myself, just because feedback is not something that has really ever been a part of any community I've been a part of. And it's almost just like kind of the way that I've always treated things, which one I'm really excited to get myself out of, but like also realizing how much of a challenge it's going to be is like to just bottle up my feelings until they all come out in, it usually comes out in anger. So squirmy is an appropriate word in my opinion. But I'm excited to see how that's going to unfold.
Yeah, and if I could just speak to that, like even what you were saying earlier, Micah, about not wanting to team lead and like not thinking that was anything you would be called to do or be good at, and it's the community that was able to see that in you. It was your community that was able to see something that you didn't see in yourself and was able to call that up out of you and encourage you in that, so that you're like, okay, let me take that to the Lord. Okay, like he is asking me to step into that, and maybe I don't feel qualified, but he's calling me to it anyways. And I think that's something that I saw in my race, was like that aspect of things that you don't see in yourself that your community does. And now I'm better because of it, and I'm more aware of myself, and I'm more confident. Like you think that getting feedback, you're gonna like hear all your insecurities and you're just gonna be like torn down, but it's really it really builds you up. And I see that already working in your life, that your leadership and your squad and your team like sees that in you and believes in you, and is willing to speak that over you, so that until you believe it about yourself.
Dang, that's really good, Cam.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Andrew, you got anything else? I mean, I feel like I could ask questions all day, but I think we're good for now.
You'll just have to have us on for round 2, like Connor.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, we'll have a year to do it, so I'm not too worried.
You'll have to get Mac and Jenny.
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Okay. I knew I had another question. So the two of you and Connor were all on the same squad when you originally did the race, right?
Yes.
So one, like, how freaking excited are you guys to be squad leading together? And two, like, how do Jenny and Mac fit into this now? Because I know you guys both know them too, right?
Yeah. So Jen was actually our alumni squad leader for our race.
Okay.
I'm really excited. I'm like, okay, here's the thing. So Connor and Cam already knew that they were squad leading. Like they knew way before I did. I got thrown a curveball by Sweet Fran 2 weeks before y'all's training camp, and she said, "Hey Suze, what'd you think about squad leading?" And I was like, "What?" So I'm stoked. I think it's going to be awesome. It's been so cool just like getting to connect with Connor and Cam, but also on the other side, like getting to do this with Jen and Mac as well. Like it's going to be so fun, and it already is. And so I'm so excited just to like get to spend more time with how many, the 4 of them, and I don't know, I just think it's like it's just going to be so sweet. Like it's such a curveball from the Lord, to be honest, but I'm so excited for it.
Yeah. And I mean, just to echo that, I think it's one of those things where you're like, you look back and you're like, what would we have ever done without Mac and Jenny? You know, like that's kind of what I'm feeling. It's like, yeah, it made sense before, but like, there's going to be so much more like that God's going to bring with them that we didn't have before as a leadership team. So I'm really, really excited. Like Sue said, like we've done the race with Jenny. I'm really excited to learn from Mac too. And I know that the both of those women are going to bring so much to our squad that we didn't have before. And they're both in G42, which is Leadership Academy right now. So they're serving as part of their practicum with our squad. So they're going to impart so much from G42. Like some of the stuff they're learning is just crazy. So I'm excited to learn from them and to watch them impart things to our squad that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm so excited to have them with us too, and to just get to continue to, do the world race with you guys. Very thankful to have the leaders that we have.
Thankful to be here.
Yeah.
So thankful for H Squad.
Same.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap things up for this episode. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of More Than a Mission podcast. We will see you guys next week. We want to thank you for listening to More Than a Mission. For more information and to keep up with our ministries, follow us on social media at More Than a Mission Podcast, or email us directly at morethanAmission@outlook.com.